Okay, so it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter for tonight, Ann Howald. And Ann is a member of the Milo Baker chapter and lives in Sonoma. She has had a career as a botanist. She got her master's degree at UC Santa Barbara. For our chapter, she's led many, many walks. She's been a fabulous leader. She's also been involved with other CNPS chapters through the years, notably Bristlecone chapter and also the chapter in Santa Barbara. I'm forgetting the name of it at the moment, but so welcome, Ann. Thank you so much for doing your presentation. I'm so sorry we're not doing it in person, but we'll be recording it. So if anyone wants to see it in the future, they're welcome to have a look at it on our YouTube channel. If you go to our website, you'll see the link to it. It might take a few days before we get it up posted, but it will be there. So go ahead, Ann.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. See how this works out.
Looks good.
How's that look, everybody? Or at least Wendy.
That's great.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to this presentation. Thank you so much for making time this evening. I have had an interest in Mono County plants for very many years, since the 1970s. But it was only when I retired 8 years ago that I was able to really dive deep into studying the plants of Mono County. And I set as my goal for my retirement project to create an annotated checklist that documents all of the plants that are known to exist in Mono County. So what we are going to do this evening is just look at some of the results of those efforts and also visit a number of places in Mono County, some of which you may be familiar with and other ones you may have never heard of that have very interesting, beautiful, and rare plants. So first, just a little introduction to the county itself. It's kind of a medium-sized county in our state of California. And it has an enormous diversity in terrain and features. There are 5 major mountain ranges that either have part of or all of their territory within Mono County. Here along, I hope you can all see my cursor. Maybe Wendy and Erica can let me know if they're seeing my cursor on the map. Can you see it up at the top?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. It's just a little black arrow, but it's the best we can do. So along the west side of Mono County, all along the west side of the county, this is the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevada. So of course, not the entire range, but a good portion of it. Down in the south, a portion of the White Mountains occurs in Mono County. A little bit farther north are the Glass Mountains, entirely in Mono County, the Bodhi Hills, and the Sweetwater Mountains. In addition, there are a number of smaller ranges. The Honeywell Hills are one, the Benton Range is another. So there's a lot of topography. There are also basins, the Bridgeport Valley, the Mono Basin. I imagine many of you have visited Mono Lake and the Mono Basin. And I want to especially point out this area right here, the Long Valley Caldera, which was the site of a very large volcanic explosion about 750,000 years ago. And it's said that some of the ash from this explosion reached as far east as Nebraska. But actually, most of it fell locally. And this feature of Mono County, the volcanic tableland, which we're going to visit in a while, is where a lot of this volcanic ash fell and welded together to form a welded tuff that is called the Bishop Tuff. So with that short introduction to the features of the county, I'll just say a very few words of about some of the early botanical collectors in Mono County. There have been literally dozens of people that have studied the plants of Mono County over the years, but I especially want to pay tribute to some of the very earliest collectors, and in particular, members of the California Geological Survey. This was a survey that with the goal of measuring topographic features all over the state of California. And they visited Mono County twice. And one of the things that they did was to collect plants. And in the early years, in 1863, William Brewer, this fellow seated in the photograph, was the plant collector. He was trained in plant collecting, and we have about 115 of his collections from Mono County. He made many more throughout the state. And in honor of his work, a number of plants have been named for him. And this is just a list of probably some of those that occur in Mono County. A few years later, Harry Bolander took over as the state botanist. We have 98 collections of his from 1866 and 1877. And again, there are plants that were named to honor Bolander. William Shockley was a mining engineer who collected mainly in the White Mountains. He was an amateur botanist, and there are about 120 collections of his from Mono County. And here are some of the plants that occur in Mono County that were named for Shockley. And I especially want to mention Annie Montague Alexander. She was the daughter of a wealthy sugar plantation owner in Hawaii, and her resources made it possible for her to contribute greatly to natural history in California. She was a primary benefactor of the University of California, Berkeley, and her help was essential in establishing 2 museums there. She and her partner, Louise Kellogg, collected animal specimens for many, many years for the museum. But then at a time when Annie Alexander was actually fairly old, I think about my age, she got interested in plants. And she and Louise Kellogg collected thousands of specimens of plants, mainly in the Sweetwater Mountains, the Bodhi Hills, and some in the Sierra Nevada. And one plant that we're going to see again later, named in her honor, is a buckwheat, Eriogonum alexandri. So let's take a look at just a quick summary of some of the numbers of the things that I've found. When I began this study, I did a very rough estimate of how many species, plant species, were known from Mono County, and I came up with about 690. So over the past 8 years, well over 80 species have been added, not all by me by any means, but I've just been keeping track of these through the years. And this is about how many we have as of a count I did, just a few days ago. So the last time I did that count, about 2 years ago, about 8% of the known species were non-native. And so you can see that a lot of the new ones that have been found in the last 8 years are actually non-native plants. And some of those, but not all of them, are weeds. The largest families include, as you might imagine, the sunflower family, the grass family, the mustard family, peas, which include loco weeds and lupines, 2 of my favorites, the buckwheat family, sedges, and the phlox family. And This probably is not a surprise to anyone who's spent much time looking at plants in the mountains, but our largest genus of plants is carex, the sedges, and we have 64 documented species of carex in Mono County. And that is right in line with what we have in California, because carex is actually the largest genus of plants in California. So what are some of the things that have come to light in the last 8 years? Well, more than 80 new species have been added, and one of these was found by Joy England from Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden when she was doing her master's thesis in the upper part of the Rock Creek Basin. She found this little member of the carrot family, Pygmy mountain parsley, and it just shows that we definitely don't know everything about plants that are out there. This is a range extension of about 39 air miles north from the nearest known locality, which is in the High Sierra of Inyo County. And I also want to take this opportunity, because you're seeing my first indication of photos that have been loaned to me for this presentation. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the photographers that loaned me their images for this presentation. It certainly would not have been anywhere near what it is without these additional images. Bolanders mock dandelion. This is in the sunflower family, as I think you can see. Many, many, many yellow-headed sunflowers out there in California. This is something that I had not found any indication of for Mono County, but I suspected that it would be there because it's found right over the border in Yosemite National Park. So I've made many forays up Glacier Canyon, which is the first canyon that you come to when you move to the east from, shall we say, one part of Yosemite, and it's in the Sierra, of course. And I just had my eye out for this plant, and eventually I did find it. So now it has been documented from Mono County. In 2016, I was driving over Monitor Pass, and I stopped to stretch my legs, and there was a very eroded slope there. And I looked down at the bottom of that slope and found this plant in the waterleaf family, the Hydrophalaceae, called cat's breeches. Really beautiful little plant, and still that's the only record of this plant in Mono County. I also found at Fish Slough, a wonderful place for flowers, this tiny little Nema. These used to be in the Hydrophalaceae, but they've now been transferred into their own family, the Namaceae. And this one is called egg leaf fiddle leaf. So say that fast 5 times. And it's a very diminutive little plant, just a couple inches long. And then in 2019, Victoria Hamilton and I were up botanizing in the vicinity of Sonora Pass in Toyabe National Park, and I noticed these enormous moss beds growing on granite by the side of the road. And I said, you know, we've really got to get out and take a look at those. And they were just loaded with plants, you know, probably 3 dozen different plant species. And I was crawling around on my hands and knees trying to identify this and that. And I came up with this little monkey flower that I just, you know, was not able to identify. I knew it was something that I'd never seen before. I used all the keys that I had. I just, you know, scratched my head over this one. And I decided, well, it was time to send this off to an expert. So I sent some specimens to Guy Neeson, who is an expert in the monkey flower, this monkey flower genus, as well as several others. And he got right back to me and he said, my goodness, he said, that's a new species and I'm going to write it up. And the article that he wrote is noted down here at the bottom of the page. It's in Phytoneuron from 2020, pages 1 through 7. And that, by the way, is a free online journal that anybody can access. All you have to do is just type in Neeson Phytoneuron 2020 and you'll come up with it. And lo and behold, when I read the article, I discovered that he had named this plant after me, which I was just very grateful for and honored by. So I call this plant moss bed monkey flower because it grows in moss beds. And it took Steve Matson and I about 2 years to finally get to one of these populations when the plants were in flower. And Steve took these absolutely wonderful photographs, and he and I wrote another article just more about the natural history of this plant that came out last year in 2021, also in Phytoneuron. One of the pictures that Steve was able to get miraculously was of this little bee. This is a mason bee in the genus Osmia, and there are about 95 species of Osmia in California. And after consulting 4 different Osmia experts online and sending them this photo, they said that they could not really tell what species it was, but they could tell me that it was a male bee, not a female, but a male. And therefore, it could not be pollinating this monkey flower, in spite of how it looks, because male Osmia bees only collect nectar. They do not collect pollen. So the pollinator of this little monkey flower is yet to be determined. And I wanted to show you the habitat of this plant and these moss beds. They are truly phenomenal. They occur on very seepy granite slopes. And you can see from this picture up in the upper right that they're covered with vascular plants. I took a sample of this moss and I sent it off to Jim Shibach, who's one of our moss experts in California and also internationally. And he was kind enough to identify it for me as Imbribrium alpinum, alpine bryum moss. And when I investigated that moss further, I found out that actually the moss itself is not all that common in California. So this little population of the monkey flower, and here's one right here, if you can see my cursor, this is a lodgepole pine needle bundle. So that's about 1.25 inches long. That gives you an idea about how large these plants are. This is what I call population number 6. All of these photos were taken at the same location. And that's all I've found so far is 6 very small populations. Aaron Sims of CNPS, our rare plant person, is considering giving this some kind of protected status. But I would like to spend a little more time searching because I feel that there have got to be other populations out there. I just feel that this is not a very easy plant to find. So you can all go out and look. So another thing that I'm doing is trying to identify things that are locally rare in Mono County. This is an effort that is going on throughout California with people that are working on the floras of various counties. And everyone has their own way of defining locally rare specifically for their county. But what it essentially means is that this is a plant that it isn't rare in California, it isn't rare globally, but there are very few populations, very few sites known for this plant in the county that you are working in. So I call this plant Zauchneria californica still. I'm kind of old fashioned, but a lot of people now are referring to it as Epilobium canum. One of the locations which Dean Taylor collected from this locality back in the 80s. And it's on limestone. This is a big limestone outcrop at the base of Mammoth Rock near the Mammoth Lakes Basin. I'm sure most of you have been there, and it's still there. Victoria Hamilton and I went on a California fuchsia hunt this last summer, and we were able to find it. Another location, much easier to get to, and on granite, in this case, is along Highway 108, which is the highway that goes up to Sonora Pass. And here you can see it just right along the road. At the present time, I only know of these two locations along Highway 108, and then this one very distant population in near Mammoth Lakes. But I'll bet you there are a few more out there. And it's fairly common on the west side of the Sierra. So what I call my checklist is eventually going to be a book. At least I hope I'm going to get that far. And I just wanted to give you a little example of what the annotated checklist looks like. So it's not just a list of the name of the species, but it's going to include some information about the family, some text information, how many genera there are in that family, how many species. Of course, all of this is specific to Mono County. The complete scientific name of the plant, the common name of the plant, or at least the common name that I'm familiar with, a brief description of the plant, and especially if I know any idiosyncrasies that the plants have in Mono County, I'm definitely including those. And then what is the abundance of the plant in Mono County? All of this is specific to Mono County. What is the habitat? What are the vegetation types that it occurs in? And then these are specific locations where either collections or iNaturalist posts that have been verified occur in Mono County. So I'm making a list of all of the major features of the county. This stands for Sierra Nevada. This is Bodhi Hills, Glass Mountains. And some of those lists are quite long for common species. And then the elevation range, again, I got this by going through many specimens and looking at what the elevation ranges at which this plant was collected. And then for each species, there's going to be one or more specimens or other forms of documentation that show that this plant is truly found in Mono County. Those that are CNPS listed, I will note that, and then elsewhere I'm going to have a table that gives the actual designation, whether it's 1B or whatever it is. And then this is just one of my personal notes. This little plant, this little golden violet, is much more common in Mono County than records indicate. It is CNPS listed, but let me tell you, you can find it in many places. And I think the reason for this is it's a very early bloomer. It blooms at a time when a lot of people and botanists are not yet visiting Mono County. So that happens sometimes. And then I'm also giving the former, the most recent previous scientific name, if there is one, that, that the species had. So we're going to start on our visits to various parts of the county. Some of these I think will be familiar to you, and other ones may be tucked away in corners that are places that you may have never heard of or visited. So this is a view looking towards the west from the Volcanic Tablelands. And this is the Bishop Tuff Formation, that welded tuff that was blown out of the Long Valley caldera so many years ago and now covers miles and miles of territory in southern Mono County. In the foreground, we have Monopenstemon, Penstemon monoensis, one of the really beautiful penstemons of the county. In the middle ground, that yellow flower is shining blazing star. We're going to see that again in just a minute. And then the shrub in the background is indigo bush. Off in the distance, the Sierra Nevada, and right up here, if you can see my cursor, this is a little tiny bit of fish slough. So fish slough is a desert wetland, and it actually divides the volcanic tablelands into two different parts. So if you're out on the tablelands in a wet year and you are lucky enough to get there before the sheep do, this is the kind of scene that you may see with shining blazing star. It's very common. Down here in the corner is a close-up view, again by Steve Matson, and there is a very similar Menzelia, if you are interested in that group of plants, called Menzelia jonesii. And according to the expert in Menzelia, what we have on the volcanic tableland is a different species. It's Nittens. And I have to say, all of the places where I have looked at the seeds of this plant, not just on the volcanic tableland, but in southern Mono County, and you really do need the seeds to tell those two species apart, it's always been Nittens that I've found. So, okay, a few more plants from the volcanic tableland. These are mostly common, although this one is down here is a little less common. So 2 of the 26 different kinds of lupins that we have in Mono County are shown here. These are both annual species. Mojave lupin, as you can imagine from the name, has more affinities with the Mojave Desert, whereas short-stemmed lupin, very, very little short stem, is more of a Great Basin species. Cacti are well represented in Mono County. There are not a huge number of species, but finding records other than photographic records can be tough. Let's just say that it's difficult to make a plant collection of a cactus. And so you don't find very many of them. But beaver tail is quite common on the volcanic tablelands, and also on the east side of the White Mountains in a little valley over there called Fish Lake Valley. There's quite a few of these. Crowned muilla is something that I believe Steve Matson was the first to discover this out at the volcanic tablelands near Fish Slough just a few years ago. And I think the reason, it's actually quite common out there, but I think the reason is because it's another early bloomer. And if you really want to see this plant in flower, and I must say it's diminutive, this stem is maybe a half an inch long, flowers maybe, almost 3/4 of an inch wide. It has one single channeled leaf, and that's really all there is to it. But it's flowering by March, and it will only be flowering if it's a wet year. So this is well known from Inyo County and now from the Mojave Desert further south, but this was a new discovery just a few years ago. And here we have sand blossoms in the phlox family, Lynanthus perrii. This is not all that uncommon in the plant world to have a species that actually has 2 different colors of flower in the same species. And you might wonder, how can that happen? And other people have wondered, and they have studied this. And if you go online and Google Lynanthus perrii, you will definitely find scientific papers talking about how these 2 flower morphs are maintained. And just to give you a very brief summary, the white flowers are the ones that have what's called greater fitness, which basically means they are more successful in producing seed, but that only happens if it's an extremely wet year. On the other hand, the purple morph, the purple flower morph, is maintained because it results from a single dominant allele. So if you want to know more about the mysteries of sand blossoms, I encourage you to look at those papers online. This is, I think I took this picture in 2018, just showing you what a typical population looks like, mixed purple and white. You can also find populations that are entirely white. And as for me in Mono County, I'm not sure I've ever seen one that was completely purple, but maybe they're out there. So this is another kind of question that I have as I'm, considering the plants of Mono County, whether something is rare in California, not just in the county. And this came up with Stonecrop facilia, Facilia saxicola, which is a very tiny little facilia found out on the volcanic tableland. And looking into this at online records, I discovered that there were only 4 collection records from Mono County and 4 from Inyo County, and that was it for the entire state of California. And I was wondering, and it's not CNPS listed. And I thought, well, gee, is this one of these rare plants in California that has slipped through the cracks? So I did some further surveys between 2016 and 2019. And in fact, I even led a CNPS field trip out there. Some of you might have attended that field trip, where one of the things we did was to search around and see if we could find new colonies of Stonecrop facilia, and we did. We found quite a few. So what I would say now is that this plant, you don't see it every year, but it is widely dispersed on the volcanic tableland. And it typically occurs in small colonies. So it's easy, it's a small plant, it's easy to miss. And in California, it's possibly endemic to the Bishop Tuff substrate, but it's found, over quite a large area in North America. It extends to Arizona and Nevada. So maybe not eligible for CNPS listing at this time. Now we're going to visit the Mono Basin. I took this photo in 1975 from the north shore of Mono Lake, when the lake level was much lower than it is now. And the main thing I want to point out here is the Mono craters, which certainly could be considered, in my mind, a small mountain range. Some of these craters reach about 10,000 feet. There are about 20 in all, and it's a relatively recent geologic formation. The oldest volcanic craters, are at the south end of the range, and they were active about 40,000 years ago, whereas the youngest craters, including Panem crater right here, not nearly as well developed as some of these larger ones, were active as little as 600 years ago. So, watch out when you're out there. So first habitat that we're going to investigate in the Mono Basin is the pumice flats. Much of the Mono Basin is covered in a gravel made up of an extremely lightweight rock called pumice that was blown out of the Mono craters, and probably some also from the Inyo craters, which are another set of craters between Mono Lake and Mammoth, years ago. And these locally referred to as sand flats are very productive in terms of plants. Not that they're completely covered, as you can see, but there's a lot of interesting things out there, including portions of a Jeffrey pine forest. And there are a few lodgepoles out there, and on the margins, some pinions as well. The thing about these pumice flats is they may look dry and they can be pretty hot if you're out there in the summertime investigating them. But if you dig down just a few inches in this very porous soil, you'll find that there's moisture at depth, which is often the case in substrates that are well drained. So one of the common plants of all of these sand flats or pumice flats is the one in the upper right-hand corner, now called Diplochus mephiticus. It's a little annual, and the common name is skunk monkey flower. And all you have to do is just nudge one of these with your toe, and you'll instantly find out why it's called skunk monkey flower, because the aroma that it gives off is just like how a skunk smells when it's been surprised, shall we say. And this plant is very tolerant of light disturbance. Driving on the pumice flats is not really permitted, but of course, some people do it. And the monkey flower seems to be very, very tolerant of that. Another interesting plant that is in the same area, this crater sand flat, is this little wavy wing. The members of the genus Cymopterus, and this is in the carrot family, are called wavy wings because the fruit, if you look at the blow up here in this little box, has wings, and the wings are wavy on the edge. Stems are prostrate. This is just beginning to come into fruit, so I don't really have any flowers in this picture, but they're not all that spectacular. So I collected this many years ago and couldn't figure out what it was, and I mailed a specimen to Lincoln Constance, a carrot family expert at UC Berkeley, and he said, "Oh yes," he said, I remember that spot. He said, I collected that same plant there in that very same area about 10 years ago, and I still don't quite know what it is. But I think after that, we both decided that the best fit was Cymopterus cinerarius, Great Basin wavy wing. And the thing that was unusual about that is that this is a high elevation plant. All of the locations in Mono County, with the exception of this one, and there may be one other one in the state that is as low elevation as this. It's about 7,100 feet. They're all 10,000 feet and above. But the thing I eventually learned is up here on the tops of the monocraters, which are at 10,000 feet, there is a population of Great Basin wavy wing. So I think the most likely explanation for these few little isolated populations of this is, hey, the fruits blew down from the tops of the craters, and they found a suitable home down on the pumice flats. Mono County does not have very many plant species that are state listed. We have 4, and I think that's in part just showing that the habitats in Mono County are in very good shape. Much of it is public land, it's open, and it's healthy habitat. So this is one, though, that is state listed. It's also CNPS 1B, and it's monomilk vetch. So one of the 33 different species of Astragalus that we have in Mono County. That happens to be one of my very favorite genera. And so I'm always happy when I find a new Astragalus. These are the fruits, these curved structures right here. And in our Astragalus, in the American West, the fruits are very important to identifying what species of locoweed or milk vetch you have. These also occur in the Old World, and I found out recently from reading about them that the fruits are not as important in identifying species In Europe, for example, they use more the flowers and also the leaves. Another almost endemic of the Mono Basin is monolake lupine. So another of our 26 lupines, many of them are blue flowered like this one. And this is a CNPS 1B plant. And its habitat is pumice soils. So not necessarily always in the pumice flats. There are slopes in the Sierra that are covered with pumice, and that's where this plant extends outside of the Mono Basin proper. Lupinus duranii is the scientific name, and this, of course, is in the pea family, the Fabaceae. And then just a couple of Asteraceae sunflower family plants that are quite common out in the pumice flats. On the right is pumice hulsea, Hulsea vestida, and on the left is Oregon sunshine, an Areophyllum that's quite common in pumice soil areas. And I had to include this because this is a plant that more people ask me about than any other plant in Mono County, people that are visiting for the first time. And they say, what was that large flower that I saw that was white and yellow in the center? And it's prickly poppy in the poppy family, the Papaveraceae, so related to our state poppy, our California poppy, our state flower. And a typical Papaveraceae with these crinkled petals and many stamens and a large fruit. It also produces a yellow-orange latex. The places where you see this are often disturbed areas. So roadsides, I think this is why it comes to people's minds. They see it growing along the roadside. But when there are fires, which of course we've had quite a few of lately in the Eastern Sierra, thousands of these prickly poppies will come up within the next year or two. And they survive for a few years, and then eventually they die out. And I'm sure they leave an enormous seed crop waiting for the next fire. The other habitat that we're going to visit in the Mono Basin is a very unusual one. It's right on the eastern edge of the Mono Basin, and that means it's right on the edge of Nevada. And this habitat consists of a few isolated hills. You can't really call them anything other than hills, with junipers on the margin, no pinions out here, just Utah juniper, and then a few different shrubs that are of the Great Basin affinities, Great Basin sage and Chrysothemis viscidiflorus, sticky rabbit brush. And then there's this white gravel all over the surface of the ground. Oh, and don't miss my botanizing buddy here, Western diamondback rattlesnake. I happened to be lying down on the ground and saw this thing kind of out of the corner of my eye. Anyway, he just went about his business and I went about mine. So this was a great mystery to me the first few times that I visited. What is this substrate? Where did it come from? Because it supports a very interesting group of plants, including some that are extremely rare in California. So this is a close-up showing one of the common plants that's found there, Mount Rose buckwheat. And this is the variety Beatleyii. If you look this up in the Jepson manual, you won't find any varieties. It just lists Eriogonum rosense, and it says that this is a high elevation species. But here it is at about 7,000 feet growing on this strange substrate. I consulted with Greg Stock, who is the Yosemite geologist, and I took him some chunks of this white gravel, and he said, oh, well, that looks like silicious sinter. So it's a silica-based rock, not calcium, as you might expect. And he said, when you have this hydrothermally altered, I sent him photographs as well, this hydrothermally altered gray clay, and you have this gravel on top. This is a substrate that was created underwater, where there were hot springs. And this area was at one point under the Pleistocene version of monolake, known as Lake Russell. So this is what we have now, very unusual habitat with some very unusual plants. Here are some of them. This beautiful Humboldt Mountains milkweed. The stems are prostrate. The flowers are much larger than most of the milkweeds that we see kind of on an everyday basis. It's not rare, but it's just found in a few places in Mono County. Something that is on the CNPS list is this perennial Menzelia, Torres Menzelia, and it's like a little shrub, and it has barrel-shaped fruits that are not visible in this photo. And a true evening primrose, Rhemothera cespitosa, subspecies crenita. This subspecies is known for the deep pink color of the petals as they age. So all of these are found out on these white mounds of the far eastern Mono Basin. Likewise, these two plants, which were first found in California, first collected and discovered in California by Jerry Team from the University of Nevada at Reno Herbarium, these are still restricted only to the eastern Mono Basin. Spiny milk vetch is CNPS 2B. It's a very small plant, only about 4 inches across, and it's also unusual because the leaves have very few leaflets, usually just 3 to 5 leaflets per leaf, as compared to many local weeds that have 5, 10, 15 pairs of leaflets. I was recently, I guess I should say, I recently learned through an iNaturalist posting that another population of this spiny milk vetch has been found also in the Mono Basin about 6 miles west of this location. So now we know two locations. And facilia here is in the Brassicaceae, and you can see the fruits down here. It's one of its characteristics is this curved pedicel, and then the fruits are covered with star-shaped hairs. And I believe Steve Mattson and I made a special field trip out here to photograph these plants. This was a very interesting find that came about as a result of a field trip that probably some of you who are listening attended. We were out in this habitat and Mike Hagabush, also from the University of Nevada Herbarium, was looking around and he said, "What's this plant over here? What's this plant over here?" And we all ran over, and Jerry Team took one look at it. It didn't look anything like this. It was a very dried up little specimen with one tiny fruit. And he said, "Oh, wow, that's the best thing we've seen all day." He said, "That's Oxytropus aureophila variety Juniperina." So something new to me and to Mono County. And I think it was a year or two later, Jerry and I went back to census this population and discovered that it does extend. The Nevada border is, probably 50 feet past the top of this little ridge. It does extend into Nevada, and the plants look very healthy. They produce many fruits, but it's quite a small population. So we published a little noteworthy collection item in Madronio, and that's out there for everyone to read. The interesting thing about this is that it's a significant western range extension of this plant. So what I mean by that is that the nearest known locality is about 210 kilometers or 130 miles to the east in Nevada. So it was a plant that Jerry, who's an expert on the Nevada flora, was very familiar with, but something that those of us from Mono County who were on this field trip had never seen before. So we're going to the Bodhi Hills now, and where our viewpoint here is from the top of Bodhi Mountain. We're looking to the east into Nevada. This is the Wasatch Range off in the distance. The Bodhi Hills are a range of ancient volcanic rock, very dry, consisting mostly of sagebrush scrub and pinyon woodlands. There are some drainages. You can't actually see any of the water, but the rough creek drainage follows this pattern right through here and then off into Nevada. This is Bald Mountain, which is in the Bodhies, but just slightly over the border in Nevada. And this is Beauty Peak, which is right on the border between California and Nevada. This is the Dry Lakes Basin. And not all the lakes in the Dry Lakes Basin were dry at the time that I took this picture. And I just want to say here that Tim Messick is definitely an expert on the Bodhi Hills, the plants of the Bodhi Hills. And he has a wonderful website and blog at bodhihillsplants.com. And I recommend any of you that are interested in the Bodhi Hills to check that out. He has a complete flora of the Bodhi Hills listed there with keys, and very excellent resource if you want to know about plants of the Bodhi Hills. This is another plant that caught my eye when I was scouting for a field trip, and then I brought a whole group of people out there, and we all marveled over this incredible, population of multicolored paintbrush. And for a while, I tried to invent a scenario where our common desert paintbrush, Castanea chromosa, had mutated and formed, lighter individuals, and they had hybridized with darker individuals. But when I thought about this, after a while, there were just a whole lot of things wrong with that idea. For one thing, this is over 8,000 feet, and that's quite a bit above where you usually see Castanea chromosa. Furthermore, this population consists of individuals that are, pale yellow, light orange, medium orange, darker orange, but not really that dark reddish color that is so characteristic of Castanea chromosa. So I went online, I looked for resources, I looked for photographs, and lo and behold, I found many photographs showing a plant that looked exactly like this. And then I got the brilliant idea to key it out in the Intermountain Flora rather than trying to key it out in the Jepson manual. And it keyed right out to Castanea angustifolia variety flabescens. But to make sure, I contacted Mark Egger, who's an expert in Castanea. I sent him specimens, I sent him photographs, and he agreed that this was, in fact, another disjunct population of a plant that is fairly common in Nevada and extends all the way to Utah. Since this population was found, this is at the base of Masonic Mountain, still in the Bodhi Hills, but it's called Masonic Mountain. Some other locations have been found. And so it's much more widespread than we previously knew. These are the Sweetwater Mountains over here, just to orient you. And I just want to give credit to Joanne Hines' beautiful photograph. She was on that field trip, and she was so taken with the beauty of these plants that she and a friend got up before sunrise the following morning and drove all the way back to the Bodhi Hills from Mammoth in order to take these pictures. And she allowed me to use this one. So thank you again, Joanne. So Alexander's buckwheat, we're still in the Bodhi Hills, and now we are not too far from Masonic Mountain. We're on the upper edge of Masonic Gulch. These are a few Jeffrey pines that occur in that part of the Bodhi Hills. And yes, we have another yellow-headed buckwheat. There are many of these, but because of its special characteristics, this is one called Eriogonum alexanderi, named in honor of Annie Alexander, who I mentioned earlier. It's a CNPS 1B plant. And this is, in fact, the only verified location in California. So most of the distribution of this plant is in Nevada. It had been collected here by Matt Lavin, who's now a botany professor at Montana State University in 1981. And as I so often do, I was curious for some of these isolated single collection records, whether this plant was still there. With all the changes that we've seen with climate change and fires and what have you. So I have to thank, again, Jerry team and Jan Knocklinger for allowing me to tag along on and even distract them on part of a field trip that they were on to take me to this location. And we found it, and the plants are still there, very healthy, in 2017. So it's still there. And I point this out partly because, there are so many things that are changing in the plant world these days. And so at least at this point in time, it's good to know that there are plant populations that have survived for a very long time, and so far are doing well under these changed conditions. Another rare plant that's nearby in the Bodhi Hills, the very first place that it was collected and recognized, is this locoweed, Astragalus oathrus var. Lavini. And yes, that's the same Matt Lavin. He collected this in the Bodhi Hills, and eventually Rupert Barnaby, who was the expert on North American locoweeds, named this for him. There is another variety of Astragalus oathrus in California, in Mono County, and it's in the White Mountains and with some outliers in the Benton Range. And it has purplish pink flowers, and there are some very slight differences in the leaflets, which I'm not all that sure are significant, but the flower color is definitely different. And I've visited many populations of this, possibly all that are known in the Sweetwater Mountains and in the Bodhi Hills, and they are all white flowered, or at least all of the ones that I've seen are white flowered. So I think there's quite a geographic distinction there between the white flowered form and the purple flowered form. So here's another plant from the Bodhi Hills that is recently what I would call, new to California. This was something that I found just by doing research online. Now that we have so many records that we can look at online, I was using the site called SciNet, and I discovered two collections by Matt Lavin of what's now called a Rhemothera nevadensis, Nevada suncup, from the Bodhi Hills. I've gone out to look for this in the general location where Matt collected it, and this is one that I have not been able to find yet. So we don't have any collections of this in any California herbaria yet, but I'm sure a number of us will continue looking. So just one more little spot in the Bodhies that we'll take a look at, a couple plants from here and then move on. We're back up on Bodhi Mountain, this time at about 9,500 feet. And just note how red these old volcanic substrates are. There's an unusual community up here of Artemisia arbuscula and some Persia and phlox and a number of things. And something I found that I just have not been able to identify to my satisfaction is this, this buckwheat. It's definitely a member of the species Eriogonum ovalifolium. And you can tell that if you can look at the close-up of this single flower right here. The outer row of tepals is much wider than the inner, so more than twice as wide. That and some other characteristics identify this as Eriogonum ovalifolium, a very widespread perennial mat-forming species of buckwheat in, excuse me, throughout the West. But it doesn't really fit the descriptions of any of the varieties that have been described so far. It has these very brown margined leaves. And if you use the key in the Jepson manual and other keys that were prepared by Jim Reveal, the buckwheat expert, you'll find that plants that have brown margin leaves key out to this variety Exemium, except that this is a rare plant that really doesn't look anything like this and is found in a few locations quite distant in the Sierra. The flower heads unquestionably resemble variety Purpureum as it's described, but the leaves are much smaller than the range given for variety Purpureum. And most of the plants have prostrate flower stalks or peduncles, and that is a characteristic of the variety Depressum, but variety Depressum is, I believe, not supposed to occur in California. So I have sent some specimens of this off to an Eriogonum expert. I haven't heard anything back yet, and we'll just see what we find out. So one other little note from the Bodhi Hills, this is mountain valerian. This is something that Annie Alexander and Louise Kellogg had collected at the base of Bodhi Mountain back in 1945. And they had given in their collection notes fairly specific information about where they had found this plant, but I could not find any subsequent collections. So I went out looking in 2017, following their directions, and sure enough, at almost the same location at the base of Bodhi Mountain, almost the same distance from the town of Bodhi, there's mountain valerian. So it's definitely still there 75 years later, very healthy and happy. So now we are going to take a look at Monitor Pass Road. This is Highway 108 going up over Monitor Pass. And this is an early summer or late spring view looking off to the east to the Sweetwater Mountains, still covered with snow. The rock type up here is very similar to what you see in the Bodhi Hills. It's this old reddish volcanic rock. There's pinyon woodland, and there's sagebrush scrub, the kind of sagebrush scrub that I and others often refer to as enriched because it has so many other plants growing with it, including many wildflowers. So some of those that you can see, this is a location that you can definitely drive to. Just drive along the road and jump out every once in a while, see what you find. Brown's peony, Peonia brownii, which is in the peony family, the Peoniaceae. This is a very primitive family where the numbers of sepals, the numbers of petals, stamens, and so on are not very well defined. And what I mean by that is they're variable. So you don't just have a set number that you always find the same number of any of those. This is a perennial herb. And interestingly, on the east side of the Sierra, the southernmost population of this Brown's peony is found in the Bodhi Hills in this similar kind of rock type. So far, only one population, as far as I know, has been found in the Bodhi Hills, but it's actually fairly common along Highway 108. And then just this last year in the burned area off of Antelope Valley up in the Colville Walker area, I found this sprouting up in the burned sagebrush all over the place. Bitterroot, this is the state flower of Montana. Lewisia rediviva, the genus named for Lewis of Lewis and Clark. And the type that we have is variety minor, very common along the Monitor Pass Road and also, excuse me, in the Bodhi Hills. Cat's Breeches, I already mentioned earlier. The one location that we know of in Mono County is along Highway 108. There are 5 species of larkspur in Mono County, or maybe 7. I'm not quite sure because the small ones are, let's just say that they need some taxonomic work, and there's a hybridization that occurs that makes it very difficult to tell whether you have 1 species, 2, or 3. But this is a beautiful one. Sagebrush plant and common, not just in the Monitor Pass area, but in the Bodhi Hills and many other places in Mono County. And this is probably my favorite thistle in the world. If you look up the common name in a book, it'll say snow thistle. It's a subspecies of Cirsium occidentale, which we have right here in Sonoma County. If you know Venus thistle, if you're from Sonoma County, this is a relative of Venus thistle, but my name for it is crazy mixed up thistle. And you just have to see one of these things that is about 8 feet tall with these branches going off in every direction and these blood red flower heads. And it really, you know, looks like something that landed from Mars. And I couldn't resist putting in a couple pictures of mule's ears. It's a very common perennial herb in the Asteraceae. The picture on the right are the leaves coming up out of the ground after the snow has melted, and very widespread, occurs in many locations. But at the top of Monitor Pass Road, you get these enormous stands of mule's ears. Okay, we have one more location to visit, and that is a dramatic one for sure. We're standing on the south shore now of Mono Lake, looking up towards this landform, which is the Dana Plateau. It's relatively flat, about 2 miles long, and of course, a part of the Sierra Nevada. Not the easiest place to get to, but if you do get up there, you will see some very noteworthy wildflowers. So to get up there, you take the Tioga Road, And along the way, you will notice and may want to stop for any number of these beautiful flower gardens. This one consisting of Sierra soda straw and mountain pennyroyal, both of which are extremely popular with a variety of insects and many other flower gardens. But if you're going to do that, you should make that a whole separate field trip, because you need to park up at about 9,500 feet and then hike past Tioga Lake and up through Glacier Canyon. And then the last 500 feet is really just a scramble with not really much of a trail up a talus slope, and you will pop out on top of the Dana Plateau in right about that location where my cursor is. It's pretty flat, not totally flat, and there is a central wet drainage that is just loaded from July to August with all different kinds of flowers. You've left the trees behind. This fringe on the edge of the plateau is the shrubby form of white bark pine. So you're definitely above timberline when you get up here. There's granite, and the granite tends to be concentrated in, well, not entirely, but some of the wetter parts of the Dana Plateau. And then there are these metamorphic, dry metamorphic rock slopes that have a variety of plants on them. In the foreground here is what we used to call Potentilla fruticosa shrubby cinquefoil, but now it has a new name, Daisyophora fruticosa, and it's in the Rosaceae. So be certain, if you get up there, to walk over to the eastern edge and look down over that edge towards Monolake, and you can see this beautiful view of Levining Canyon in the high mountains between you and the lake. This is a place I found out where I am not a climber, but I found out by talking to climbers up there, and there are a lot of them, where the climbers climb all the way up here and then they climb down off of these rocks and come back up again. So exciting place for climbers. But it's an exciting place for botanists also, because it's got just such an array of beautiful wildflowers. Carl Sharsmith, who was a professor at San Jose State and botany professor, and also worked in Yosemite and did a lot of plant collecting in Mono County in the 40s and 50s, thought that this was one of the best displays of alpine wildflowers anywhere in California. And I've been told, I wasn't on this field trip, but I've been told that in his 80s, he was still able to get up to the Dana Plateau, which is a challenge even if you're much younger than that. And when he got up over that rim, he bent down and touched and kissed the ground. So here are some of these beautiful alpine flowers in honor of Carl Sharsmith: alpine gold and Pygmy fleabane. This is Erigeron pygmaeus. Both of these are in the sunflower family, the Asteraceae. And then down below, we've got two more of our 58 buckwheats that we have in Mono County. Raspberry buckwheat. This is another variety of Eriogonum ovalifolium with flowers that vary in color from much paler than this to this dark pink. And Loeb's buckwheat, another high elevation species with prostrate stems and flowers that change from yellow when they're young to reddish when they're older. And just a few more: Nuttall sandwort, which is in the Caryophyllaceae, the pink family. Davidson's penstemon down here in the corner, the blue flower. This one hybridizes with the pink penstemon that you may know as Pride of the Sierra or Pride of the Mountains, Penstemon newberrii. and mountain monkey flower. So yet another erythranthe. This one likes little seepy places and the edges of streams, and the leaves are often, although not totally always, slimy. This is still a mystery. You can see that I have a question mark up there in the corner. And the reason is that this is listed in the coffee table book, the Flora of Yosemite National Park, which some of you may have seen, as occurring on the Dana Plateau. It definitely occurs on Mount Dana, that's a different landform. It's separated from the Dana Plateau by Glacier Canyon. And if you want a reliable place to see Sky Pilot in late July, early August, walk up the side of Mount Dana and you'll definitely find it. But there is no specimen in the Yosemite herbarium of Sky Pilot from the Dana Plateau. I have not seen an iNaturalist post, which I'm sure there would be if someone had seen this plant. So I'm just saying that it's still unconfirmed. The far end of the Dana Plateau reaches 12,500 feet. So definitely high enough for Sky Pilot, and maybe some intrepid hiker will go up there and see if they can find it. I want to give thanks now to people who have helped me with this project, and especially two people because of their extraordinary efforts. Andy Sanders, who's the collection manager at the UC Riverside Herbarium, and also Jerry Team, the curator at the University of Nevada, Reno Herbarium. I've mentioned him several times already for the help he's given me. Both of these people have been instrumental in my project by helping me with identifications, with getting my specimens pressed, and with getting data that I have collected online so that it can be used by anyone who wishes to. So many thanks to both Andy and Jerry. I really would have been tough for me without their help. In addition, this is an ongoing list that I add to regularly of all the people who have helped me in the field. They have helped me with photography. They have helped me with special identification problems, and and they've assisted me in getting my collecting permits. So each year I renew my collecting permits with the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service so that I can make these scientific specimens properly and legally. So with that, I say thank you to all of you in the audience. I much appreciate you attending this presentation. And if there are questions for me, maybe Wendy can read them to me.
Okay, there's one question that came in at the very beginning of your presentation. Clint Kellner asks, do you have any thoughts about why Annie Alexander only had one species of plant named after her after collecting so many plants?
You can't say everything when you're giving one of these talks. She may have many plant species named after her. So, and probably has birds and mice and all kinds of things. What I was listing was just a selection of species that were named for those early botanists that I was mentioning. So that's my best answer. Okay.
One other question, Wendy Krupnick asks, at what elevation are the moss beds where you found the erythranthe?
Well, where I've found them so far is between about 8,000 feet and 8,600 feet. But I have to say that that's not a complete survey by any means. And there are lots of other granite outcrops. I don't, maybe this plant even occurs in Yosemite, you know, that's quite a ways away, but it's quite hard to find. I discovered later that there were other botanists who are, you know, much more famous and much more knowledgeable than I am, that had visited some of those exact moss beds and they didn't find it. And I think that's probably because it has a very short blooming time and it's a tiny little plant. And believe it or don't, there's another yellow flowered monkey flower that grows in those moss beds. Erythranthe primuloides.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, there was a question about contact information. Excuse me, if anyone wanted to get a hold of you, how would they go?
Oh,
what would be the best way to get a hold of you?
Let's see, how can I do that? The technically challenged person here. So Wendy, so the way that you would do that probably is through my email. And can I put that in the chat?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Let's see, type your message here. Okay.
And then just bring it down to everyone.
Okay.
See everyone there?
Everyone.
So if you click on the little arrow, I think you have host and panelists. Is that what you have there?
Yes.
Click on that little arrow there.
Oh, here we go. Did that work? No.
And then you click on everyone. Do you see everyone?
Yes.
Click on everyone.
Send chat to. I did.
Okay, then you type your message.
Oh, you have to type after that.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, folks. This is my first Zoom presentation. Okay, and then what do I?
And then return.
Oh, how's that? There it is. Okay, so there's my email.
Excellent.
But none of you who heard this presentation are allowed to ask me about prickly poppy, okay?
All right, well, in the chat, there are a lot of people that are thanking you, and so be sure to have a look at that.
Okay.
And just want to thank you, Ann. Fantastic presentation. And anytime that you want us to come out and help you out there, just let us know.
I'm hoping we can have a field trip, you know, before too long. I think that would be a lot of fun. So we'll see what we can arrange.
That would be wonderful. And thank you to Erica, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. The recording will be available soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.